Hi, and welcome to Live Notes, an introduction to Imperial College's Lunchtime concert series run by the Blyth Centre for Music and Visual Arts. My name's Dr. Emily Worthington. I'm a musicologist and clarinetist based at the University of Huddersfield, and today I'm going to introduce the Revolutionary Drawing Room's programme of music by Antoine Reicha and Rachel Stott. 2020 is not just the 250th anniversary of Beethoven's birth. It's also the 250th birthday for one of his childhood friends, the composer Antoine Reicha. Reicha was born in Prague in 1770, but he was orphaned as a kid and he was adopted by his uncle, who was also a composer called Joseph Reicha. When Joseph was made the director of the court orchestra in Bonn in 1785, the young Antoine Reicha went with him, and it's there that he completed his education and also got to know Beethoven and a whole host of other really talented young musicians who were there at the time. Like Beethoven, Reicha eventually left Bonn to stretch his wings and further his career. The first place he went to was Paris, and then he settled in Vienna for several years just after 1800, where he wrote a series of operas and published lots of string quartets. But eventually the disruption of the Napoleonic Wars and the constant threat of invasion in Vienna caused him to leave Vienna and go back to Paris. And it's there that he settled, and he spent the rest of his life there and died in 1836. In Paris, Reicha made a career for himself teaching composition, and he eventually became a professor at the Paris Conservatoire. Reicha published a large number of pedagogical and theoretical treatises on different aspects of musical composition. And looking at these alongside his musical works, we can see that he was a real rule breaker. He was really interested in understanding how music worked and then how far you could push the boundaries of the different systems of composition and the conventions of musical language that he was working with. You can already see in Reicha's Viennese period string quartets that he was exploring all the possibilities of drama and interplay you could create with four instruments speaking to each other through music. His later compositions for wind instruments, most of which date to after his arrival in Paris in 1808, these show a further development of this language. And it really reaches its peak in his 24 wind quintets, which he published between 1817 and 1820. Reicha's interest in writing for wind instruments was probably motivated by the fact that his first group of composition students in Paris included some of the rising star wind players of the Paris Opera. These were the flautist Joseph Guillou, the oboist Auguste Gustave Vogt, the clarinetist Jacques-Jules Bouffill, and the horn player Louis-François Dauprat. It was Reicha's association with these wind players that led to his growing understanding of how to write for wind instruments, and he worked with them specifically to develop the 24 wind quintets. Around the time the wind quintets were published, he also issued a series of quintets for solo wind instrument and strings, and the first of these was the Quintet Opus 89 for clarinet and strings. However, while we can be fairly certain that the other quintets, the quintet for flute, the quintet for oboe, the quintet for horn, and the quintet for bassoon, were almost certainly written for his collaborators in Paris, it is possible that the quintet for clarinet and strings may actually predate this period and might have been begun in Vienna. And that's because the compositional style of it is a little bit more classical, it's a bit more regular than his quite experimental late works. Nonetheless, it seems very likely that the French clarinetist Bouffill would have played it. And although it is a little more early in its style compared to his other works, it still has plenty of very experimental and interesting harmonic quirks and a huge amount of dialogue between the instruments, which is so characteristic of Reicha's composition. Both the opening movement, which is in a sonata form, and the following andante are filled with this kind of dialogue between the clarinet and the violin particularly. This is followed by a menuetto, which is really witty, with lots of rhythmic and harmonic surprises, and a lovely trio with a quite rustic lyrical theme. The final movement begins with this very dancing tune in 6/8, which quite quickly gives way to more sort of darkness and drama. There's a real harmonic twist start to come in, and some quite imaginative contrapuntal part writing, which Reicha weaves in and out of the dramatic episodes. This is the movement, particularly of this piece, that seems to point forward to his later works, the things that were published around the same time, which are more experimental in their language. The second work on the programme is the String Quartet No. 4 by Rachel Stott, entitled Euphonia. This new work was commissioned by the Teesside Music Society with support from the RVW Trust, and recently I spoke to Rachel about the inspiration behind the work. So Rachel, your new string quartet Euphonia is inspired by a story written by the 19th century composer Hector Berlioz. Could you tell us a bit more about this inspiration?
Yes, the story comes in the 25th of Berlioz's Evenings for the Orchestra, it's a highly entertaining read. It's about a group of musicians in an opera orchestra pit who most of the time think the music they're playing is so rubbish that they might as well just chat as well as playing. And so somebody tells a story, and on the 25th evening it's described as a story of the future. And it's a story about this city in the year 2344, which is 500 years ahead of the time of writing, in which the entire city is organised for the promotion of music. That's the entire point of the city. It's in the Harz Mountains in Germany, and apparently this idea came because Berlioz went on a trip through Germany and was writing to everybody, oh, why can't the French value music the way the Germans do? They spend so much more money on it. And then he wrote this story about the city in which every child is trained from a very early age in rhythmical exercises, so that by the time they start to learn an instrument, they can already do polyrhythm, they can do subdivisions of the beats in all kinds of complicated ways. They then start to learn an instrument, and also they have training later in harmony. They have specialist teachers. So for instance, if you're a string player, you have a specialist teacher who's an expert in harmonics and an expert in pizzicato, and all this it's kind of like the ultra music school of all time. And all the cellists in the city live on Cello Street, and all the sopranos live on Soprano Street. It's quite bizarre. Anyway, the only problem with this, as I read it, is that this city is basically a totalitarian state. So they don't have any choice, and the Emperor of Germany determines what they do and what they play and so forth. So the idea of my piece was that 4 of their string players form a string quartet and escape. And the way they escape, because this is something that Berlioz envisaged for his city in 2344, is by hot air balloon. He imagines this world in which mankind is indeed flying the world, but he doesn't think of aeroplanes, he thinks of hot air balloons, manned airships. So these 4 string players spot an unmanned airship, jump into it, launch it, and sail off through the skies. And first of all, they cross the Rhine, head across Belgium, reach the Belgian coast, and then the first fellow says, hey, why don't we go and have a career in London? So they cross the English Channel, but they don't quite make it, and they actually crash down on the beach at Margate. And that's the end.
What a great place to land, by the seaside.
Absolutely, and it turns out Margate has become an independent republic of the arts at this point in time. So they're back where they started, really.
It's a future I think we can all wish for.
Yes, absolutely.
So this is your 4th string quartet, but it's yes, the first to be written specifically for your period instrument quartet, the Revolutionary.
Absolutely.
Yes. Did that shape the way that you wrote the piece?
Definitely. So one of the things that really intrigued me about the Berlioz story is, although he's imagining all these things in the future, like the hot air balloons, and he imagines that the volcano Etna is now extinct and there's a lake there, that people go swimming in Lake Etna, all kinds of things he imagines. But it's quite interesting what he doesn't imagine changing. And one thing that he specifically refers to is gut strings. So in this time, 500 years in the future, they're still playing on gut strings. Which of course is what we're doing. So my idea was to write for the instruments exactly as for the music that we play of the 19th century. And also I decided not to use, or to challenge myself not to use, harmony that Berlioz wouldn't have known, chords that he wouldn't have known. However, the way that I put the chords together is not the way Berlioz would have done it. So for instance, there's one movement that's entirely dominant sevenths. Berlioz would, of course, recognise the dominant seventh. He refers to them in Euphonia. In fact, Euphonia does give enough reference to specifics of music theory that you can tell the music they're playing is tonally very much as it was in the mid-19th century. But no, he wouldn't have expected a movement to be entirely dominant seventh. So it's obviously it's different from the music of the 19th century. But that was my challenge. And my other challenge was, because he says the children are all experts in polyrhythms when they're 7, to give us as much challenge rhythmically as possible. So, yeah.
And so what was it like rehearsing your own music with your own group as opposed to the music of a long dead composer?
Well, I try really to think that I'm just one of the 4 and I'm approaching the music just as they do. And it's easier than you would think, because actually I've written other music since I was writing it in the spring. So it's almost like I can distance myself from it and think it's not the piece I'm writing now, therefore it's sort of already passed into being part of music in the world. But of course it is different, and of course they can ask me if it's not clear what I mean. And we spend all our rehearsal time asking ourselves what Beethoven meant, and we haven't got the answers. So there are advantages to having somebody there. Yeah.
So now they're asking what Rachel meant.
But then I can actually say, sorry, I didn't make that very clear, did I? Yeah.
And you wrote this piece during spring 2020, during the lockdown. Did that have any effect on how you wrote it?
It definitely did. At the point that we heard that this concert Imperial would definitely go ahead, regardless of what might be going on in the world in October, which was the first concert I'd had confirmed at all since everything was cancelled in March. So from that point, I thought, right, I'm writing this piece. And the situation then was we were all in our own homes, perfectly able to practice, but with no possibility of meeting to rehearse. So what I thought was it made sense to write the piece in short movements, and then I could send out to people a bit at a time and they could be practicing, because we didn't know at that stage at what point we would be able to start rehearsing again. So instead of writing in 3 movements, 4 movements, 2 minutes, what I've done with my previous quartets, I've actually written this piece in 9 very short movements. And it is also slightly programmatic. It has this story. And the hot air balloons feature in the story, I think also partly because it was at that time, it was such a strange experience to be in London looking at these skies with absolutely nothing in the sky. No aeroplanes. I mean, there weren't many clouds actually, but it was just an amazing time somehow. And that made me think about, if I just had a hot air balloon and could launch it. All 4 of us could be in a little bubble in this hot air balloon playing up in the sky. So, yeah, that definitely was part of how the piece evolved. Yeah.
Well, wonderful. It sounds wonderful, and I'm really looking forward to hearing it. So thank you so much for talking to us about it.
Thank you, Emily.
I really hope you enjoy the performance of this wonderful music, and please tune in again for the Blyth Centre's other lunchtime concerts.
A very warm welcome to the third Lunchtime concert, to all those joining you via our live stream and to all of you in the Great Hall of Imperial College London. Our concert today is the annual Malcolm Haines Memorial Concert. Malcolm was a long-standing member of Imperial's plasma physics group, very keen musician, organist, and actually a founding member of these concerts. And it's a real joy to welcome his widow Polly and son Paul to the event. Our performers this afternoon is the period instrument group, the Revolutionary Drawing Room, and they start their programme with the London premiere of Rachel Stott's Euphonia in 9 short movements, and then we welcome clarinetist Colin Lawson to the stage for the Reicha Clarinet Quintet. So please do give them a very warm welcome. Thank you.
Four members of Euphonia's finest string quartet spot an unmanned airship and decide to launch it. At the last moment, the cellist springs aboard. The second violinist and viola player throw out the ballast. The first violinist mans the valve cord. The balloon floats upwards. High up in the clouds, the string quartet plays softly, the second violinist expressing joy in their newfound freedom. The tower organ sounds the alarm to alert the city that an airship has been stolen. The cellist steers the balloon higher and then west over the Harz Mountains. The sound of the organ fades away. balloon has drifted southwest and is crossing the Rhine near Koblenz. While the violinists and viola player lie back on their divans and contemplate the shapes of the clouds above them, the cellist gazes down at the Stolzenfelser castle, imagining performing from its turrets and balconies. The quartet is surprised to hear music coming from the cloud above them. A balloon descends and hovers a few meters away. In the basket, a wild-haired old man stoops over an Aeolian harp. The wind plays exotic music on the strings of the harp. Intoxicated by the wind's sweeping the balloon westward, the first violinist declares his ambition to travel to London. He inspires the quartet to imagine a glorious future performing in its concert halls. The balloon reaches the Belgian coast, and the quartet catches sight of the glittering sea. A gull circles above them and then swoops down to the water. As night falls, a land breeze sends the balloon far out over the waves. As the balloon crosses the English Channel, the viola player observes the ever-changing moods of the waves and expresses the wish to live forever by the sea. Scanning the horizon to the west, the cellist sights land, but to her alarm, she realizes the balloon is losing height. In desperation, the players throw everything out of the basket except their instruments. The balloon approaches the shore, sinking lower every minute, and finally crashes down on the beach at Margate, a seaside town which has declared itself an independent republic of the arts, another Euphonia.
Thank you.